Hello and welcome back to Creating a Positive Impact with me, Sam Hamilton Turner. I'm really sorry that there was no episode last week. I was overwhelmingly ill. I had something called norovirus, which is not so fun. So for those of you with kids or around kids, do stay safe. I would not recommend that to anybody. But I am back this week and I'm fighting fit. And I'm ready to introduce today's episode with Susan Allen Augustin, one of the co-founders of Here We Flo, a company specializing in natural plant-based personal care for life's messiest moments. They started with period care products, but now have also moved into contraception and bladder care products as well. What started life as a girly chat in a university bathroom has now grown into a serious challenger brand with products in major supermarkets across the country and genuinely improving the lives of many people. As you're about to hear, it's not something I know an awful lot about, which is actually part of the problem: education, or lack of, especially amongst men of my age and older. But not exclusively so. Even women present some pushback to what Susan and her team are all about. It's an interesting story and one that I think you're going to really enjoy. And if you do, please remember to give the show a rating and a follow, and then send a link to the episode to someone that you think will really get something from it.
So the Here We Flo origin story goes like, I was studying at the London School of Economics after working in the nonprofit sort of social justice sector in the US for years and years, where anything corporate associated was basically a dirty word. I felt like there was something that I could learn about business. There must be some merits to it. So I came to the program and I met and became instant best friends with my co-founder, Tara Chandra. And where I was, as she would describe, a skeptical East Coaster, it was a proud, like, hippie hipster that basically discovered kombucha way before it was cool. And so we were studying together. I was feeling inspired by these classes, and we were having a classic BFF chat in the bathrooms. And I said to her, let's start a business. Let's start the feminist mafia. And because she was a crazy hippie, she was like, yes, absolutely. Let's do this. What is our moneymaker going to be? And she was having a really hard time finding organic tampons. And at that point, this was like 11 years ago, I didn't know what an organic tampon was. I assumed the ones I'd been using most of half my life were made from cotton because it's white, looks like cotton. But she sort of talked to me about like they're being made of synthetic materials that take hundreds of years to biodegrade, that shed and leave things inside of you. And then sort of like then thinking about that from that sustainability angle as well. The average user uses 11,000 products in their lifetime. So just imagine how much of that is going into landfill. So we sort of had that piece of it. And then from sort of like the brand and tone of voice aspect, you look at conventional products, they're like the packaging's really garish, the commercials are ridiculous. It's like, I don't want to play tennis in all white when I'm on my period. And so he just wanted to create a brand that was like we were having that best friend chat in the bathroom, felt like that. So the sort of tone of voice was funny, feminist, and fierce. We want to challenge the stigma and all the things that sort of surround the category. But then we also want to create products that are better for the planet and better for our bodies and just do it in a fun way. And so this sort of idea for the business was born there. And then like leaning on my social justice background, wanted to have a give back. And so that's why we give 5% of our profits to people and planet. We have charity partners as well as product donations that we make. So yeah, so that was the main sort of like idea for the business. And we use our time in school to really research and fine tune the idea. And then Tara did her dissertation on the business case. So that's
amazing.
where it all started.
Amazing. Obviously, as a man, I know absolutely everything there is to know about these products. So, but I'll I'll ask the questions anyway. But no, I guess maybe that's even something in itself. You mentioned there's an interesting word you just used there, which is stigma, and that was definitely something I wanted to ask you about. What do you think is the conversation at the minute, or at least until you guys came along? Like, what were these stigmas that you guys were seeing?
So it's evolved a lot, but I mean, it's even using anatomical language, right? So talking about vagina or vulva, very taboo. And I can remember when I was growing up, if you held just like a tampon, like just a new tampon at a boy, they would run away from you as if you were holding a bomb. So there was just something about it that it was like dirty. It was something you couldn't talk about. And that was really like it being out in the ether of society. Girls really sort of like internalized it. And so you try to hide your products when you go into the bathroom. Like, God forbid you have to buy products when you go to the store and the cashier is a boy. So you're picking up all these other things you don't need just to hide the fact that you're like buying your tampons, you know? And so those are sort of like the sort of funny tongue-in-cheek things that happen. But the way that we've seen that materialize is then when, you know, we've talked to customers who have suffered with like endometriosis or polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS, where when they had the symptoms, the doctor just sort of put them on birth control when they were 13 or 14 as a way of sort of dealing with the symptoms, but not dealing with the underlying issue. And there's so much self-advocacy that you have to do. But even for someone that's informed, when you step into a doctor's office, there is something about like, that being a professional where it feels uncomfortable, sort of challenging and pushing them. And so even worse, when you have something that's wrong with you, but because there is no conversation around it, you could just think, oh, it's normal because I've shared my symptoms and the solution was just this. And I think sort of with the rise of Gen Z, where they are challenging and fact-checking everything, it's a lot of pushback. And so we've actually seen them not want to use birth control, really going back to natural methods and sort of like demanding more, using like language, being really conscious of language, being really inclusive. And so that change has come a lot in the last several years, sort of arise as we were scaling the business. I think interestingly how sustainability has come into it, the sort of war against single-use plastic sort of forced retailers, and because you know it's really the larger companies that can make a big difference when it comes to all of these things. That pressure there is what sort of like brought about a change in more conversation around periods. So I think there's more taboo around sensitive bladder and sexual wellness, which are the other product lines that we have under the Here We Flo umbrella. But there's been a lot of strides in sort of the period talk, but there's still a lot more to do. Yeah,
good. I mean, I'm glad you said it's changing, because I mean, okay, confession time. I'll this isn't going to be comfortable for me, but I think it will be helpful here. As a, I don't know, say sort of 13, 14, 15-year-old kid, I was absolutely part of that problem. Like, I was definitely one of those really immature boys that was like grossed out by this idea of a girl. And it's, you know, am I ashamed of that? Yeah, I am. You know, not a particularly mature time in my life. Things have changed for me, and as you suggest, the conversation at large actually is changing. So that is good, because I know that I'd be quite alarmed if the conversation was still where it was at when I was at school, because that was not good. And I can only really imagine the shame and stigma I would have been unknowingly putting on my, you know, friends, I suppose. Well, not even just people I, you know, didn't know, but actually my friends. So yeah, I think I wanted to mention that because it just, for me, I get you, you know, I actually see where you're coming from. It's definitely where it was. I was part of that problem. There's no doubt about it. So I'm glad that people like you have come along and started to shift that. yeah, you talked about the product lineup that you have. I think maybe let's duck into that a little bit more, just so we know exactly what it is that you guys have on offer. So you started with the the tampons, essentially, yeah, and then you've kind of moved into some other worlds as well, right?
Yeah, so I mean, our sort of tagline for the business is shamelessly natural care for life's messiest moments. And so we're wanting to bring that plant-based, sustainable swap to any bodily, messily moment. And so we started with periods, but after I had my first child, we started having conversations about sensitive bladder because and just realizing, oh, we hadn't talked about it before, but my co-founder had experienced it sort of like early in life. And that's the thing. I think people sort of associate it with old age or an aging pelvic floor, like heavy incontinence. But it can really happen at any point in life. Like it could be hormonal, sort of like post-pregnancy as you age out of menstruation. But I mean, it's still so stigmatized. I remember we had done a PR campaign on World Happiness Day where we had trampolines made with the Glow logo, because our sensitive bladder line is Glow, and sent it out to press with products. And people wrote and thanked us for the products, but nobody wrote about it. Like, it's still such a sensitive topic. So that's one where you see lots of sales online, but even there's not as much appetite for it in shop because the being able to just sort of like do the education around it and speak around it, there's still a lot more that we have to do there. So we've focused on periods and then the sexual wellness, our XO line. So we have, love to brag about these because it's our most sustainable product. So the tagline on these is "Sex just got better," and they are organic, like natural rubber condoms. We're sort of pioneer members of the Regenerative Rubber Initiative. So our condom manufacturer he's basically been a lifelong vegan, really passionate about sustainability. And so he set this up because he felt that the fair rubber standards weren't high enough. And so he works directly with the rubber tree farmers, and the rubber is grown in an agroforestry system. So instead of thinking rows and rows of rubber trees, it's literally think of a forest where it's grown with other symbiotic plants. So that's better for the environment. They have sort of like minimal collection points. And then the rubber is collected and brought to the factory in Malaysia where it's made in a solar powered factory. So it's an incredible product and it works amazingly, which is the most important thing across any of these products, is making sure that the efficacy is there. Otherwise, you've lost the plot already. But it's just incredible. And then we work with our charity partner, Climate Partner, to do offsetting. So at the bottom of the package, there's a little QR code. And if you scan that, it tells you which project is supporting us, one of the sustainable development goals, the SDGs. Because we're really sort of passionate about sustainability and about giving back. And so, I love talking about EXO. And the condoms are amazing as well. We also have a Naughty by Nature lube that's available in the States right now, but we're working on bringing it to the UK as well.
Wow, so much good stuff, so much. I'm really interested to know actually how, because my knowledge of these products is so bad, where we were beforehand. So what was it specifically about existing products on the market? I mean, let's take tampons as a starting point. What was it about the ones on the market that wasn't working for you? You mentioned organic. So what was it about, kind of materials? Were there health implications to that?
Yeah.
Tell me about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so like a conventional tampon, for one, which is what, we found out when we first started looking into it, is companies are not required to put ingredients on it. So you wouldn't have known that it wasn't made of cotton because there's no ingredients on the box.
Interesting. Okay.
And so when you look into it, then you find out that they're made from rayon and other synthetic materials. During the sort of like bleaching process, dioxins are created. And then because it's synthetic, like organic cotton, when it gets wet, sort of clumps in on itself. But something like rayon, you can think about like a shirt. It sheds, you get those bobbles. Now imagine that's inside the most sensitive area of your body, right?
See,
In
yeah,
your
yeah,
vagina.
yeah.
So it's not great. And then just from a sort of user perspective, which I know you won't be able to relate to, it's very, yeah, it can just imagine sort of like Velcro. It can sometimes feel like that when you're
Wow.
removing the tampon. So it can be very uncomfortable as well. And then, yeah. So it's a user experience. It's what it's made of. It's what it's exposing you to. All around not good. And so I think now, if you go onto TikTok, like people are just like, there's so much chat about toxic period products, because people are sort of like becoming more informed about these things. And you just didn't know before because there weren't very many alternatives and just not any education on it, because not even the ingredients list wasn't on the box.
Yeah. I mean, it really sounds like you're now on that, on that path, that journey, and that trajectory to actually start taking on some of these really big established names, right? I mean, these are huge companies that have been around for a long time and with a lot of, a lot of momentum, and there's going to be a lot of resistance there as you try to move things along. So, I mean, how's that working at the moment for you guys? How are you finding this kind of, I mean, I'm going to say battle. Would you call it that? It's a bit of a climb to try and compete with these big dominant players?
In a sense, like, so they've done what you would expect, which greenwashing. Because this was often our challenge when we would sometimes talk to male investors. It's like, oh, what if this big corporate just copies your product? And what they've done instead is they'll do like a cotton core tampon, which means the middle of the tampon is cotton, but the outside that's touching you is still made of those same synthetic fibers.
So the same problem.
Doesn't make any sense. Or they'll put like a cotton top sheet on a pad, but the rest of the pad's still made of the same plastic like materials. And so what happens is, like, they put those out at a higher price point. We outsold them. They've price matched to us. We're still outselling them because the demographic that we're appealing to, which is sort of like who we lovingly call our Gen Zennials, and then sort of like millennial and Gen X moms who are buying for young Gen Z and Gen Alpha that are now starting to get their periods. They are not persuaded. I think there's like a natural cynicism of that generation of anything that's like big and corporate. And so they're looking for brands that's like, okay, it's a small brand. It's run by people who actually experience periods and can understand the experience and like care about the planet. Because actually for Gen Z, where millennials were sort of more concerned about organic and good for you, Gen Z really cares about the planet. It's like, you guys have effed it up. You've handed us this planet that's on fire. That's what my main concern is, more so than like me as an individual. And I think corporates, they can't speak authentically to that audience. And so we're seeing like retailers are shifting and creating space for challenger brands because they recognize they want to bring this customer in and be able to appeal to them. So they have to provide what it is that they want. And so that's what's creating opportunities for brands like us.
Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, I like that. I guess, you put it in a really nice way, but yeah, younger generations, they are caring about this stuff, aren't they? It's really interesting to see. It's very promising to see. It's very, I love it. It's a great thing. It's kind of inspiring, I think, actually, to, I definitely sense that kind of being inspired by what they care about. It is really interesting. And you talk about retailers giving up space. I find this is another really interesting point, because you guys am I right in thinking you just got into a big retailer? Was it Tesco?
Yeah,
am I right in saying
so we launched with Tesco 2 weeks ago.
That's amazing. Yeah. How was that really process? Like, that's awesome.
They've been really supportive. I think if you're not familiar with sort of like retail and like being a consumer goods business, like, it takes such a long time to get things into store because there's only 1 or 2 resets a year, which is basically when they'll take new products into the store. And so
Right.
you have to sort of meet with the buyer. They do their own diligence. They have to make sure that your supply chain's up to scratch so that it sort of works with all their internal systems. And so I think, it was probably an 18-month conversation that we were having with them. And I will also say, just sort of like industry wide, since COVID, there's a lot of buyer turnover. And so the buyer is the person that's selecting the products for whatever sort of like category you're in. And so if there's no buyer over health and beauty, which is going to do period, like most of the products that we're selling in, you sort of are at a standstill until they have someone in sort of like filling for that position. So there's a longer lead time on it than I think someone would suspect who isn't in the business. But in terms of being a partner, they've been really straightforward, really supportive. We're also part of their new accelerator program. So we're in with 26 other incredible brands. And so we'll get to sort of tap in and share info. It's great to have those peers that like are a bit ahead of you or maybe a stage behind you or, in the same stage where you are as a business so that we can share points and lessons learned and all of that. And then they're really investing in sort of helping our growth. They see the potential in the brands to become much larger brands. And so we just kicked off last week and really excited to sort of work with the team there on that as well. But yeah, they've been a brilliant partner. And then we've really grown up on the high street with Boots. That was our first large account. And we have grown with them from a couple hundred stores and they're putting us into 1,200. Yeah, so it's like
it's getting
really
big.
every store that sells period care will be in there, which is really exciting and incredible. Yeah. So I think
this is like that's the bit I find really interesting that I think something we can think about. So you go from your early days as the word you used was challenger brand, and I really like that. Then when you start getting into big main outlets, right? Like, because obviously anyone can kind of start their own company, start their own website and start sort of distribution that way, right? And how a lot of people do. I imagine you probably started that, like just sort of selling through yourselves essentially. Is that right? Before stores got involved or?
So that was where it's sort of interesting is we were able to do that research on hand and so buzz was so much around Dollar Shave Club and sort of like D2C businesses.
Right, yeah.
But in researching it, we found like that didn't work as like a primary model for business. So we sort of launched being omni-channel, but really focused on retail. But we just started small. So we did a Kickstarter, raised 14,000 pounds, made 6,000 of these bad girls. These are our applicator tampons. They're in a sugarcane applicator and sold in cases of 12 into our local shops in Islington and Hackney. And so we got like our first 10 customers that way, and then our first 30 and our first 100. Like Planet Organic came on really early because we were stalking the buyers in those shops to get information when Tara was doing her dissertation. And so we had built those relationships. But really, we started small in that way, and it was so helpful because we'd sell them in, and then, Tara's local shop owner would say, everyone's confused about why there's ice cream on the shelf. Like we need point of sale. We need like education materials. And so we really learned on the go in that way. So that when we did come into a Boots, you can sort of tell them this is what we need. This is the kind of education that we can provide. And really giving that support. So growing up in retail, that's what we love. That's what we're good at. And so that's where we've been able to grow there. But we do have our own D2C business and like our subscribers that come, they stay for a really long time because they love the product. But we know the majority of people, actually 70% of period care purchases are done through grocery. So that's why it's so massive that we've gotten into Tesco now. Because that's how most people like to shop.
This is exactly it, isn't it? When you're thinking about the scale, like the distribution, like the scale of distribution that someone like Tesco's has is immense, right? Obviously, once you're dealing with them, and this is maybe what I'm trying to get at. Like, do you see a point in time and future where you're no longer the challenger brand? You are the main incumbent being challenged, right? Once you're now in Tesco's, and probably I can easily see a future where it's most major supermarkets, right? Yeah. You're all over the country, all over the world, and you are now the way that people think and buy their period products. Do you think that's possible? That's likely? That's in your crosshairs?
that's the dream. I think that's a couple decades away, right? It's like the reality is the large conventional brands still make up like 90% of the market. So there's a lot. Okay. But I mean, if you're able to even get 5% of that, it's incredible. Because the sort of like green market is much smaller. So there's still a lot of education to be done to help people understand like why green good for you is better for you. Yeah. So we're getting there. You just got to keep chipping away. But
absolutely, yeah. And you've done, you've made incredible strides as is. So I'm not trying to sort of brush over that. I'm just sort of thinking ahead. Where does it go? And you mentioned education quite a bit actually, which I want to pick up on. What kind of conversations are you having with people at the moment? Like, what is that level of education, and how are you going about it? And what are you finding are the differences between, the older and younger generations, men and women? Like, where's it all kind of overlap?
So I think I'll start with men, particularly in the younger generations. They want to be better partners. And so they're wanting to learn more. So we had a couple years ago, one Sky did like a footprint fund competition where you submitted, and the grand prize was £1 million in ad spend, which we won. And so we made this commercial that was a spoof on Bridgerton, no more period dramas. So you have people in very fancy dress in a very...
Oh yes, I saw this. Yes. I did see this. Yeah, I did see it.
And we got lots of like customer feedback saying this is incredible. I wish that we had spoken about periods like this when I was growing up. But we also got complaints from a lot of men writing in saying, "Dear sirs, this is the worst ad I've ever seen. How dare you besmirch women's dignity in this way?" Like we made a TikTok reel about it, like making fun of it, about our favorite complaints. So I mean, I think that was really interesting because that was something that really went mass. Because when we put something up on socials, for the most part, it's going to sort of hit the demographics that it is that we're trying to speak to. But for that one, I think it really signaled, we did get some of those complaints, but the majority of what we heard was really positive feedback about people appreciating the humor and just like talking. You should be able to talk about these things at the dinner table in the same way that you might talk about a headache or a backache. It shouldn't be this big taboo around it. And so I think the education is just sort of opening the space to have the conversation, putting factual information out there that maybe that you don't know what it's like to have your first period, talking about things, sort of giving facts and symptoms of like endometriosis or PCOS to just help people recognize like, oh, okay, what I'm experiencing isn't normal. I do need to go and push my GP on this. And yeah, I mean, it's shocking how different. Like, there's like lots of people who I think like millennial Gen X who were like, I never had a conversation with my mom about my period. I just got it. When I got it, I was scared out of my mind. I didn't know what to do. Or speaking about like, a lot of girls will get it in school and just teachers and things not being prepared. Like, it really just comes down to whether your teacher sort of like made themselves available or not, but it not being sort of like a systematic thing that's planned in for dealing with it. So I think it really goes along with sort of the larger conversation around sex education, which, has been used as sort of like a scapegoat and things in political conversation. But at the end of it, it's like children need to know about their bodies and what to expect. And even I've heard here, like when the big period chat happened in schools in the UK that they just send the boys off somewhere to go do something else and just had it with the girls.
Yeah, that's how
And
I
it's
remember
like,
it. Yeah.
and that's part of it too, because it's like, what if it's something the boys shouldn't know about? Like I joke with women all the time. It's like, we know everything there is to know about penises. Like, why can't they learn about what's going on with our vaginas? And to know to be kind to us and give us chocolate during this time of the month. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
that definitely wasn't in our sex ed lessons.
so it's that sort of thing. I think it's just opening up the conversation so we can understand
Yeah.
what the needs are and what it is that needs to be changed.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, are you finding in this journey much in the way of resistance from certain people or people involved in this conversation, or are people pretty much on board with where you're going with it and your approach as a business?
I think that there is some discomfort. I think the fact that we talk about periods in a gender inclusive way can be confusing for women of older generations, because they're just not
Wow. Okay.
not understanding, what it means to be trans, and really understanding gender expression and gender identity and that whole spectrum. And so that we try to use that as an opportunity for education. But at the end of the day, like, we stand where we stand. We're an inclusive brand. And it's always more important for us to make sure people feel included and not isolated than it is to sort of, cater to people who are trying to gatekeep something. Like, if a person experiences a period, then they're part of the conversation, and that's just how we feel about that. But we always try to take a position of like, let's have the conversation, let's try to understand each other better, rather than like trying to cancel people. But you do have to, but we're also clear on what our values are and where we stand. And if you disagree with that, then, maybe we're not the right brand for you. But I think it's always that's sort of like the fierceness and the funny feminist and fierce is being able to stand up for those voices that get marginalized and making sure that they're supported.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, look, stand for something and stand for it every day. Like, that's a good way to live, isn't it? No, I absolutely love it. So tell me how, someone like myself, or I mean, to be honest, anyone really, can kind of get involved with what you do. Where can we be finding out about your products and what you're all about, and how can we kind of help you guys, in this journey?
So the most obvious thing, we sell products. You can buy the products. As we said, we're in Tesco, in Boots, in Superdrug, online at Ocado, Amazon, on our own website, hereweflo.co. I think you can support our charity partners. So Bloody Good Period is working to end period poverty. They started to particularly provide products to refugees and asylum seekers, because when they come into the UK, they have a very small stipend, like weekly stipend. It's like 20 quid a week, something like that. And they have to choose between food and period products, right? So, but when you start to dig into that period poverty issue, when you think about it, you sort of assume, oh, maybe it's in developing countries where they don't have access to resources. But actually, right here in the UK, there are people with periods who can't go to school when they have them because they don't have product. And so they have events throughout the year. They have Bloody Funny, where they have Jen Brister and a whole sort of like set of amazing comedians that do a comedy show. So you can buy tickets to support that. They have the Big Give every November and December, where your donations will be matched. And then they also have the advocacy work that they do in the political realm that you can support on by writing to your MP. So I would definitely check out Bloody Good Period. They're amazing. The Orchid Project as well is working to end female genital cutting, so you can support their work. And then AKT is working to end homelessness in the LGBTQ plus youth community. So always give love and show support to our charity partners and any of the events that they have going on. And then just in your own day-to-day, it seems silly, but like, say vagina and vulva when you're talking about a vagina and vulva. And if you, for the young menstruators in your life, like, let them know it's okay to have that conversation with them, because it's really powerful if they see a man in their life not run away from the tampon, right? And be willing to have a conversation. It signals to them, this is how it should be. It's a regular topic, just like they're chatting to you about Peppa Pig or whatever else is going on for them.
It's the most important thing, yeah.
Yeah. Hot Wheels for my son, you know. What I mean?
Dear.
But there is a lot of power in language, and the way we react to things. And so just being more conscious about that as well.
I'll ask you a personal question. You're smiling a lot when you talk about this. How do you feel when when you think about everything that you've done with this company? You know, we obviously went back through your story, so you got to relive that a bit, and we're working on what you're doing now and getting into Tesco's. How does this all make you feel?
I feel really lucky, actually, because I wouldn't have imagined I'd be doing this. Like I said, I was always, I think my mom really impressed upon me at an early age that whatever you should do, it should be focused on helping other people, and just remember to ask for help when you need it, which I'm much worse at that than the helping people part. But I think on this journey, I've sort of like evolved in my thinking of what it means to help people. And I'm also very introverted. So even the fact that I'm doing this podcast, Sam, like I've grown so much in the last year when I sort of took over brand for the business. I was really focused on internal operations before, because that's my comfort zone. But it's been really great to be able to interact with other people, speak about the brand. And it is something that I'm really passionate about, which is why I'm able to do it. But just having both sides of that, of like being able to like build our team, build our culture, and then come out and try to sort of like change the culture of what's happening in the world is, I think, a really incredible privilege that I have. So even though like being a co-founder and running the business with Tara has its own like headaches and challenges, like we've scaled the business through COVID, supply chain crisis, cost of living crisis, recession, et cetera, all that's not been easy. It has like made us grow quite a bit, and it's like the honor of my life to like lead the incredible team of 12 women that we have, and to be building a business that can really have a great impact on the world, like both in terms of like the planet, because we're trying to, sell these sustainable products, but also in the conversations that I have with people, and just inspiring other people to find their passion and figure out how they'll make their impact.
Absolutely. And that is exactly why you're here. You are exactly, the kind of people that we talk to on the show, those that are doing really great work to make a positive impact. So hats off to you. And sort of long may you continue with that journey. And the last thing I'd like to do to wrap up is to give you the opportunity to nominate someone else that you think is making creating a positive impact, or someone that's doing really good work to make the world a better place. It can be someone that you know, someone that you don't. It can be an individual, a business, an organization, just someone that you think is worthy of a shout out.
Can I have two? Can I be cheeky?
You absolutely can. More the merrier.
So for personally, I have to shout out my co-founder, Tara Pre-Chandra. No, she's my co-founder, my platonic soulmate, as I joke with her often. I tell her husband that he's my sister wife.
Bet he loves that.
He's used to it now. Yeah, and she's my co-founder. She's our CEO. She's our fearless leader. She's our cheerleader. But she's just such an incredible person. She's so humble about how much of a genius she is. And like, I couldn't do this without her. I have to say, like, when I do talks and things like this and people ask me, like, how do you pick a co-founder? Like, I am just like extremely lucky and blessed that like we met, and like our friendship sort of like dovetailed with this business story. But I really, you know, we both say this all the time. We have other best friends that we grew up with, but we would never start a business with them. Like the skill set just matched perfectly. And we've both been able to sort of grow personally and professionally as we've grown the business and our roles have evolved. But she is that like sounding board that I can call up when whatever is going on is fine. And we have 3-hour-long conversations that vary from like how hot Ryan Reynolds is to, you know, what our channel strategy is going to be. And it's just like incredible. And I wouldn't change it for the world. So, you know, hats off to my love, Tara. And then sort of out in the world, I really...
Ryan Reynolds?
We love Ryan Reynolds. No, I'm going to say Michaela Loach, who is an incredible activist, both climate change, but really just like human rights. And I just really admire the way she is so consistent with her activism, but also really transparent. So it's like when she needs to take a break, she's like, I'm taking this break from social media because I need to like just restore myself. And then she comes back. She has real moral courage in the way that she speaks about things, but also makes the conversation very accessible and helping people understand how they can get involved. And I just love it. I love to see more of that coming from the younger generations. And it gives me hope that we are really going to change the world, even though it seems really effed up at the minute. So yeah, shout out to her. I love her.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's a perfect place to wrap up. Absolutely love that. That was brilliant. Thank you so much for your time.
There you have it. Susan Allen Augustin of Here We Flo. What a woman. She was great. A really good sense of humour and was willing to carefully explain what the problems are in this conversation without any judgment whatsoever. As I mentioned in the show, I was definitely one of those kids at school who thought that periods were weird and dirty and would have made girls in my school feel pretty bad about something that is a natural part of their growing up. Now, I put this down to immaturity on my part, certainly, but I know that I also wasn't the only one, and that the much bigger issue, as it so often is the case, is education. It's alarming how much that conclusion arises. It is reassuring to hear that things are improving for the better, thanks to people like Susan and her founder Tara. Just a reminder that you can find out more about Here We Flo on their website. That's hereweflo.co. There will be a link in the show notes. And Susan's shout-outs were to her co-founder Tara and Ryan... No, of course not Ryan Reynolds. It was Michaela Loach, a climate justice activist currently studying at the University of Edinburgh. I'll also put a link to her work in the show notes as well. As always, I want to know what you think, so please do let me know. You can get in touch on cpi@soundquake.co.uk. Let me know what you thought of today's episode, or let me know who you think is creating a positive impact and you would like to see on the show. Thanks again so much for joining me. I will see you next time.